Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's Lean Publishing Tip of the Day, where I'm going to be talking about motivation and writing and self-publishing. It's a really important topic for anyone who's ever written anything or tried to write anything of any length or any quality or any entertainment value. So I'll just be giving some thoughts that we've learned at Leanpub over the years, and maybe I've learned a little bit personally as well. As always, it's at the 2-minute mark of the video. You can jump there if you want to skip the housekeeping and maybe waiting around for a few people to show up. The main purpose of these uh, live streams is actually to record them so that they can be watched later. And so there's also an accompanying blog post that I'm now sharing that comes along with every one of these videos as well, so that you can get links to helpful articles, things like that, or you can read if you prefer that to watching and listening to videos. You can find us live on every day, pretty much every weekday at around noon Pacific time. We're kind of shifting around the time a little bit by maybe half an hour here or there, but I think we're probably going to settle on noon Pacific time. 3 p.m. Eastern time weekdays for these live streams, which will be currently they're on LinkedIn and YouTube and X and Instagram as well, which is kind of fun. We just started doing that relatively recently. Um, uh, and you can find the recordings on our channel at Leanpub on YouTube. Please, like and subscribe wherever you find it and all that kind of stuff. And of course, if you have any suggestions for things I should cover in the tip of the day, or things you'd like me to cover again that I maybe didn't cover as well as you thought, or that you had sort of some thoughts of your own, please, reach out. I'm easy to find on social media and email and all that kind of stuff. And you can always email suggestions to hello@leanpub.com. Let's just do the little countdown here where we go 3, 2, 1. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's Lean Publishing Tip of the Day, the kind of main content. Today, I'm going to be talking about motivation and self-publishing. Anyone who's ever started working on a book, you've maybe had a flash of insight or a great idea or something you've been willing to work on or you've been wanting to work on for a long time, and finally you just kind of got over whatever it is that was holding you back, or you finally have the time in your life to work on it and you get going. That can be a really euphoric thing. That can be an incredibly exciting moment when you start working on a book. You might just be full of ideas. You might have so many ideas you don't know whether to write down your ideas to write about later or to write about those ideas themselves now. You might be filling up entire notebooks or whatever you use with your outline and your thoughts and all kinds of things like that, and everything might just be coming out of you like a kind of like volcanic eruption. But typically in the writing process that fades, and eventually you might grow to hate your book. You might get what I call writer's guilt. I'm sure that term's been used before by other people, but writer's guilt is basically like when it's been so long that you haven't worked on your book, that starting to work on it would somehow make your sense of guilt real in a way that you can't kind of repress it anymore. And so that actually makes it harder and harder as days go by in a kind of compounding fashion to actually get back to work on your book. You can also just lose motivation. You just kind of don't feel like writing anymore. You just don't have any ideas, or you look at that list of ideas that you wrote down when you were excited at the beginning, and you just kind of just can't bring yourself to write about them. It's kind of hard to describe if you haven't experienced it before. Um, Long-term writing and artistic and kind of uh, intellectual or research projects just have this feature to them that sometimes you slow down or even stop working on them. My own primary experience with a kind of long-term self-directed writing project was a doctoral thesis that I wrote over 20 years ago now. I think about that, was, in the end, the limit was 100,000 words. So I think I was right around 100,000 words. Um, Somewhat irresponsibly, I submitted 140,000 words to my doctoral supervisor with in my head, the idea was, you're my supervisor, like just help, give me some guidance on what to cut. My supervisor was not happy about that, but did help me. But when I think about how many words I actually wrote of the 100,000 that ended up being kind of the final version, I probably wrote 3 million words or something like that. When you think about when you're writing and you sort of delete a sentence, even that, if you count all the words that you actually wrote, it would be some multiple. It did of the 10, like 10x of what you actually end up with in the end. And when you think about, yeah, how many times you reshape things and things like that, it could be, I don't know, 10 million words or something like that. I don't know. And I did have ups and downs. The one thing though, well, that one so one thing that I recommend that you do with long-term projects like this, particularly long-term self-directed writing projects, is have a 15 minutes per day rule. I also say this about book marketing. Set out 15 minutes per day to just, you might be writing one email to one person who you've discovered is kind of well known in your area or in your genre. You just find their email address, write them an email, just a friendly thing, customized to them, letting them know what you're working on and how much you love their work or something like that. But if you spend 15 minutes per day, um, one thing it keeps up is the continuity, so you don't end up in that writer's guilt trap where you kind of got this compounding anxiety about how long it's been since you've worked on your book. You'll avoid that. You'll also feel like you're being productive all the time on your book, and like keeping up your kind of feeling, your good feeling of motivation or responsibility, et cetera, is actually a really important part of the psychological journey of writing a book. The other thing about 15 minutes a day, of course, is that it adds up. That's you know, you know, going to be like hours in the month. Even if you just did 15 minutes a day for a whole month, that's actually a few hours that you've been working on your book that month. And it will keep the project alive in your mind. It'll keep you engaged, all that kind of stuff. And the 15 minutes per day working on your book doesn't necessarily need to be writing. It could be, reading old. You just say, I got to spend 15 minutes doing something about my book. It could be researching some new area. It could be going over your outlines. It could be editing, anything. Then the other thing about spending 15 minutes per day working on your book is that it's most of the time if you've got the time, it's going to turn into more than that. You're not going to want to stop after 15 minutes. You're going to go 20. You're going to go half an hour. Some days, obviously, you're going to go for hours. Working on your book. So if you have that 15 minutes per day, it's really good for psychologically, and it's really good practically as well. The next thing I would recommend for keeping your motivation up as a self-published book author is to publish early. If you're familiar with Leanpub, you know that our motto is publish early, publish often. Leanpub is set up so that it's very easy to update your book and easy to publish new versions. So we recommend that if you've got one chapter, your first chapter written, hit the publish button on Leanpub. Your book is out there. It's published. People can buy it. People can read it. And anyone who buys it, when you publish the next version of your book after adding your second chapter, they'll get all the updates for free. And doing this, of course, means that, you've actually, instead of like, the kind of, you might think of it this sort of like classic model of an author kind of going off to a cabin and writing in silence, in private for years and coming out with the grand masterpiece. This is a very different way of doing things. You write it, and then you publish it and you make it public. And so your writing is, in a sense, happening in front of people's eyes as you go. And that can be a really great motivator, because instead of waiting till the end to see if people want to read your book, you might find out right away that there's lots of people who want to read your book. You might find out that there's 10. You might find out that there's 2 at the very beginning. But getting people interested in your book, knowing that there's people out there who will, like, when you can notify them when you publish a new version of your book, that they're going to get a notification. Maybe they'll look forward to, oh, I can't wait to read the new chapter in that book this weekend or tonight. That can be a really great motivator. Obviously, another really great motivator when you publish early, and like we recommend at Leanpub, is that you can actually start getting income from your book before you finished writing it. It's kind of hard to express what a great motivation that can be. If you've got other responsibilities, if you've got like, a family and stuff like that. I've interviewed, hundreds of authors for a podcast, and I can tell you that being able to show the people around you that there's financial value in what you're doing when you go off into your study or the coffee shop or whatever every Saturday to work on your book, being able to show them that you're building an audience, that you're actually generating income from your project, is actually a really important way of getting them on board with you. So publishing early is a really great way of staying motivated in a book writing project. Another thing I would recommend is talk about it. I don't mean bore your in-laws by talking about your book yet again. I mean, talk about it with, whenever you get a chance. If there's an opportunity to talk about it, don't worry about promoting yourself. Only bring it up with people that you think are going to find it interesting. But you could say, what's interesting is I'm actually working on a book on that topic. Blah blah blah. Most people will probably be interested to hear that. But you can also talk about it in different ways. You can invite yourself onto a podcast, and again, you can do this before you're finished, while you're writing on it. I'm working on a book, on this and that. Talk about it all the time. There's an author in the United States named John Gans who talked for years about the book he was going to write about, American politics in the 90s, all the time before it finally came out, in all kinds of public appearances, well, on his podcast. But anyway, talk about your book. Find ways to talk about it. Invite yourself, like I said, on a podcast. You can do AMAs, like Ask Me Anything's online, on your social media platforms, stuff like that. You can reach out to other people who are interested in your area, experts in your area, influences in your area, authors in your area. Just write them an email, let them know that you're working on the book. Honestly, dropping a line like that without necessarily expecting a response is just a really great way to spread the word, and again, to keep yourself engaged. And write. One thing to do is ask people what they think. So if you're writing your book, I'm working on the next chapter of my book. It's on this, that, and the other thing. I'm thinking of taking this angle. What do you think? Post it on your LinkedIn profile if you're on LinkedIn. Do a little live stream. Do a little video. Talk about the book that you're working on. Talk about what you're working on right now. It's a really great way to stay motivated, because you're going to get feedback. It makes it more engaging, a lot less you and your keyboard and your screen, and dealing with other people. Another thing, speaking, I said, talk about 15 minutes a day, but there's actually, I left this till later because that's kind of more important to think of first, but actually a countable, measurable per day target is actually better than a time-based target. And this is specifically with respect to writing that I'm talking about now, not working on your book, which, like I said, can be an outline, it can be editing, etc. I mean, writing. If you're writing, you want to set yourself a sort of word target for that day, not time. And I can explain why very briefly. So when I was working on my doctorate, there were typically kind of three approaches. One, which was just kind of whatever works for you. The other one was people who would set aside, a certain number of hours per day that they would work on their thesis. And then another was people who would set countable, measurable targets, that not in time. And so, of course, what happens if you set yourself a target of, like, I'm going to work on my book for 5 hours today, as well, you sit down and, you spend 10 minutes getting your coffee ready. Then maybe you read some news. Then maybe you kind of, just get going and someone interrupts you. And then, well, look, it's time for lunch and stuff like that. And, and then you sort of get back, maybe do an hour or two of kind of writing. And then, something fun comes up, or some other obligation comes up, or you go back looking at the news or Twitter or whatever it is that you're looking at. And suddenly you'd like, your 8 hours is done, and you're like, you feel like, I've done my 8 hours today. When you know that you actually haven't. The irony there is that a lot of people who do their doctoral, like long-term work like that, think that they're treating it like a job, when they set around that time. And it's like, you are exactly treating it like a job, not a normal job. In the end, probably, which is, you're not, that 8 hours is actually going to be 1 hour of real work, typically. But in any case, what I did, for example, was I set myself a target of reading 100 pages a day. No matter what, every day for all those years, I had to read at least 100 pages. Sometimes it took, if it was like big old 17th century kind of grammars, it might take like an hour. If it was, something more complicated, like, Heidegger, it might take, hours. It might take, 20 hours to read 100 pages. But you make sure you set yourself a hard target. I would recommend 500 to 1,000 words per day, if you want to set yourself that hard target. Most of the time, you'll throw it all away, or some of the time you'll throw it all away. Sometimes you'll like overshoot it by like 10 times. But set yourself a words per day target. That way you have something concrete that you've done every day, again, to keep away writer's guilt, to keep up the motivation. Just before I wrap this up, the last thing I mentioned on the blog post here, is that, if you've got strategies for staying motivated, if you're an author, if you've written a book in the past, if you're working on one now, you can share those ideas with us. You can, do a hashtag lean publishing and hashtag writer motivation. You can @mention us wherever you find us. You can go on our authors forum if you're a Leanpub author. There's lots of other ways to get the word out there. And of course, you can always reach out to me if you find me on social media, or email me. I should be easy to find. So thanks very much, everyone, for watching today's Lean Publishing Tip of the Day, where I talked about motivation and self-publishing and writing books. If you just jumped in at the end, as usual, you can find this on our YouTube you'll be able to find this particular video within a day or two on our YouTube channel at Leanpub. Please like and subscribe and all of that. And yeah, thanks everyone for watching, and happy writing.